This is Still a Part of Us, a podcast where moms and dads share the story of their child who is stillborn or who died in infancy. I'm Lee Red.
And I'm Winter Red. And in this episode, we are interviewing author Pat Sheveland. She is the author of How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. And we're just excited to share this with you today.
As a word of caution to our listeners, this discussion contains emotional triggers of stillbirth and infant loss. Please keep yourself emotionally and mentally healthy and seek help if needed. Hope this helps somebody out there.
We are so excited to introduce Pat Sheveland today. She is a guest that we are really excited to interview today because she is, I feel like, has a whole slew of experience as well as tools in order to help those who are mourning the loss of a child kind of get back on their feet, kind of move forward, not necessarily move on from the death of their child, but move forward. And so just a little bit about Pat, and I have had the privilege of just talking with her a little bit and also reading her book, and we'll be getting into that just a little bit more. Pat actually, just from reading her book and from looking and seeing her experience, she is a healer. That's what she does. She is a healer in more ways than one. I would like to say she actually became a registered nurse after high school, and she found herself being drawn to those who were going to pass on from this life. And she was there to help families transition, help their loved ones transition to the afterlife. And so she ended up leaving, it sounded like, the nursing career for a little bit more of a corporate job. But then she switched yet again in 2012 when she wanted to really help people and hone that healing craft a little bit more, that healing talent that she has as a life coach. And so she has become a life coach per the International Coaching Federation. And she has also written a book, and we're actually going to discuss this book, which I'm really, like I said, really excited to talk to her about. She wrote this book, How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. And Pat, I'm so excited to talk to you. Welcome. Welcome to the podcast today.
Thank you so much. It is just an honor to be here. It really is.
Yeah, Pat, I'm so glad. So Pat actually reached out, and I'm glad she did because I feel like this is the perfect type of book to help our audience that are out there. I recently had one of my friends come up to me and she said, hey, this family, this is their first child that they lost to stillbirth. They are just not doing well. They are not doing well. It's been 4 months and they are struggling. And it made me just so sad. And I said, what are they doing? What do they need? And she commented that the wife was seeing a therapist. She's like, and that helps, but she's still only able to work like 3 days a week. And her husband is totally not working because he just cannot cope. He has not figured out a way to figure out how to move forward. And so reading this really helps me because it really was just a few days ago that I had this discussion, because I feel like there was some definite things that we did my husband and I tried to do to help us grieve, to get through this, that helped us move forward, like I said. And then there were other things where I'm like, gosh, I should have done that. That probably would have helped. And I thought this may actually be a really helpful book for this couple to use. So I'm really excited. Pat, you wrote this book, How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss. Tell me what inspired this book for you. Why did you write this book?
Well, my mother actually was a grieving parent. I had a brother who died as a baby 6 years before I was born. And I didn't know anything about this until I was about 5 or 6 years old. And then I came across some pictures of this child, 2 pictures, in a little manila envelope of this baby, and the baby didn't look very well. The eyes were closed and the baby didn't look well. And I approached my mom and asked in my little girl talk, who is this? Because I couldn't figure out why she would have pictures of a baby that wasn't one of my 3 older brothers. Mm-hmm. And she said, it's your brother Greg. And so immediately I had this connection with this baby. And what was interesting is his birthday is June 21st, 1952. I came along on June 22nd, 1958. And I don't know if that was the connection or what the deal was, but I just had this deep connection with this baby spirit. And as I went through life and the older that I got, I realized that I really grew up in a very sad home. No one ever talked about Greg. There were no pictures of him outside of those that were buried in that little photo album. And it was as if he wasn't ever here. And as I got older, it's like, no, I know grief. I understand grief. As you mentioned, I've worked around grief since I was in my late teens, and helping people transition. And I just knew that my mom was carrying around a lot of grief. So it was going to be his 60th birthday. This was in 2012. He would have turned 60. And my mom finally opened up about her child. And so I did a lot of questioning, wanted to just hear what she had to say about that period of time. And as we started talking, we unearthed so many emotions that she had just kept so buried in her heart. And it was so important for her to get those out. So I actually helped her on her healing journey. And she was in her late 80s.
Wow. That is, I know that was one thing I was like, wow, to hold that in for 60, basically 60 years. I just can't imagine having that just weigh on you, weigh on your heart. Did you feel like your mom acted differently? Did you feel like that was something that kind of, like you said, your home was kind of a sad home? Did you
Yes.
you felt that?
Yes, I did. And it's interesting because my two oldest brothers, one was 3 and one was like 18 months old when Greg died. And then, of course, there was a span. And so then after Greg died, it was 3 years before my mom had my brother. And then there was 3 years after that until I was born. So there almost was like this big hole in the family. And then you have the older, siblings that are almost like a whole different family than the younger ones that came after Greg.
Yeah, he's right smack dab in the middle, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would look weird. Yeah, that there's this big hole in the timeline of kid rearing and, and such
Yes.
in your home. So,
Yeah.
and so what drew you to? And yeah, let's just get into this. What has drawn you into grief? I mean, that's not one thing somebody thinks like, "Gosh, I'm gonna get into grief." That's just not one of the first things.
I'm a pretty spiritual gal, and I just feel like I've always been divinely guided, and I've always listened to my inner compass of where I need to go and what I need to do. And people always sought me out, even as fairly young, like say high school, even younger than that, and would always come to me and want to talk about what was going on with them. And I also experienced being around neighbors where there was a lot of loss. My next door neighbor was 3 years old. I was 5. He was my best friend, and he died at the age of 3. So I experienced this energy within the family and within our little neighborhood. And so as we got older, people would just come to me and they just would want to share what was going on with them. And so I always joked, what do I have written on my forehead? Shrinker. What is going on here? Because people would always come to me. And I don't know, death and dying has always been a place that I'm really, really comfortable in. I think I was just born this way.
I actually think that is very much a calling. We have seen, I work in the healthcare field, and those folks that work in such, like in hospice and that type of thing, they're called to it. I think they're very much willing to help and willing to be comfortable there and help others who are not comfortable with it. So yeah, I think it's a calling, Pat.
Yes, I do too.
Pat, so one thing that was very interesting about your book, I thought, was that it felt very much like a handbook of things to do. It was like a workbook to me, and that's, I'm assuming that is what you intended it for it to be. You talk about the breathe method. It's an acronym, and so can you kind of go into that and break down? Maybe we'll talk a little bit about each of the steps, because if you get this book, and I will put a link in the show notes so you can access this book as a listener. But I would highly recommend trying to do some of these exercises, because there is a wealth of resources that I have found, even in just, it's a really quick read in the sense, but it requires work, I think. So tell me about Breathe, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
Okay. So yes, it is like a workbook. It's I'm a coach. I'm a life coach, and I'm a grief coach. And so part of coaching is creating awareness within ourselves and also taking action so that we can move forward. Because typically when people are coming into coaching, they're looking to change whatever is going on in their life. And with grief, you just get stuck. So I named this, I don't know, it just, again, things just flow through. And I started writing this book. I just felt drawn that I wanted to be able to help, especially parents of child loss, to be able to move forward and still have a life that they can wake up for each day and say, I can do this. I can do this. I can move forward. I will find happiness someday and find some peace in their heart. So I just started writing, and all of these things are coaching tools that I've done for years. But I always say that my clients, especially the grieving moms, are the ones that really gave me all this wisdom. They're my wisdom keepers. They're the ones that have gone through this, including my own mother. And what I did is I held the space, I became the container, and then I took all of their wisdom and I packaged it into a program so that people can take steps. And doesn't mean that all you have to do is take 7 steps and you're going to be fine and dandy and no longer grieving. No, that's not what this is meant to do. But it's to give you tools and resources to be able to, when you're feeling in the darkest depths of depression and despair in your grief, that you have some tools to be able to walk forward on this journey. So the reason why I called it the breathe method, that again just showed up out of the blue. But what's the first thing that happens when we're deeply grieving? We sob.
We're sobbing, weeping,
and you can't get your air.
Yep.
Right? And you're just and just it gets stuck, and our breath gets stuck. So something that's so natural for us, that we're born to breathe, that's just something so natural, we forget how to exhale. And so that is where the acronym came from, is to be able to help people breathe again, to be able to exhale in their deepest grief.
Yeah, I remember there's actually a passage at the very beginning of the book that I really liked and kind of distilled the thoughts that I have about grief, because you actually, I'm going to just quote it because it's just really good. It says, as any longtime grieving parent will tell you, grief never goes away. Grief just becomes a little bit more volatile and more manageable as time passes. But the grief from the death of your child will always be held deep within your heart, and certain times or events can create a cascade of emotions years after. And like you said, even those, there's 7 steps, there's 7 things that can help you. It just pops up out of nowhere sometimes. And so sometimes you do need to kind of revisit and go through some of these exercises to help work through those things. So yeah, I like, just as an acknowledgement of like, gosh, this grief never goes away. It's just there. It follows you around, just like the memory of your child. Like it's always there. I do want to point out one thing also for our listeners, that for those who are also maybe grieving the child of a child that is a little bit older too, because we largely speak about stillbirth and infant loss, pregnancy loss, but Pat actually addresses even those who have passed away later in life. And so I just say this is a great resource in general if you have lost a child, because I think that is devastating regardless of the age, I think. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, some people say, my mom always, a lot of times we'll do comparison grief.
Yeah.
And my mom always said, well, Greg was only 4 months old. It wasn't like he was around and he was 15 or he was 21 or 30. And I would say, but Mom, that grief and that hole in your heart is just as deep and as big, whether he was 4 months old, whether he was, stillbirth, to whether he was 50, 60 years old. Child loss is child loss, and there really isn't a comparison with that.
Yeah. And that's so important to realize, I think, because it's so easy to fall into that trap, I guess. Yeah, it's unfortunate. So the breathe method kind of walks you through different things. I wanted to talk about, so the B was kind of being clear on where you're at. This was really interesting. Pat actually asks us to take an assessment of your strengths, where you're at today. And I thought that was interesting because I remember being totally devastated after the death of our child. I was so sad. I didn't know who I was. I felt like I was wandering around. And that was just an interesting thought of like, why do I need to take stock? Why do I need to take stock of who I am and what I'm all about? Why did you suggest that as the first thing to assess?
Well, because you have changed. The minute that you experience this deep loss, you are not the same person that was the day before or the year before, and your values may change. Your what's important to you in life changes. Your strengths actually change, and you may feel very weak in some areas. So I think it's very important that understanding who you are today and then taking stock of what are those strengths. And so that when you're moving and taking action and doing assessing where you want to go in life and moving into on the grief journey, I never say moving through it because again, it never goes totally away. But as you're walking along that path, there are strengths that you can pull up and use to help you when you're having some of your dark moments or when you're struggling and you have the brain fog and you can't figure out which way I go. Then you can tap into those strengths and know the power that you really hold within. And so that's why I want people to just like have a baseline of where you're at, because if you don't know where you're at, you're probably going to have difficulty figuring out where you want to go.
Yeah. One thing I thought I really enjoyed was your statement about how some of your strengths actually could be an Achilles heel. So explain that a little bit so that people understand what that's about. Because I think I know what you meant by it because I totally see it in myself.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm going to use myself as an example. One of my strengths is to love and be loved. Very, very important to me. And so that's just an important thing. If I don't feel like I'm being loved, I can actually act in a way that's not very helpful. I can stamp my feet and have a temper tantrum. Yes, I can. Or I could just curl up and just feel like no one loves me. So I'm just going to curl up in the darkness and then I don't talk about it. So sometimes those beautiful, because to have a strength of to love and be loved is so beautiful. That's what we're here to do. But sometimes it can go awry. And so the Achilles heel is, there's always two sides to everything.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a great strength of critical thinking and judgment, which is a great thing, but you may do overthinking about your grief or what's the next step that I need to do, and it could paralyze you.
Yeah. I was thinking about I feel like one of my strengths is that I'm fairly independent and I can kind of work things out on my own. Unfortunately, I realized while I was reading this, I was like, gosh, so that's probably something that is going to hurt me because I need to allow people to help me on those times when I cannot do it for myself. Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So I just wanted to point that out to our listeners because sometimes even though you feel like you can do it by yourself, you might not be able to. And like I said, it might be a strength. It might be something that you pride yourself in doing, being able to do everything on your own. But this is not one of those times, I think, that you can
Right.
just go through this by yourself. So thank you for sharing that. I really liked that was an interesting chapter for me. I was like, this is weird, but I guess I need to take stock. So the R in breathe. Can you tell us about that one?
So that is for reimagining your life. And I know this is a very difficult because most of my clients, I'm a grief coach, so I have a companion coaching program where I do one-on-one coaching with people. And that's probably one of the more difficult ones because they'll say, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine my future. I can't imagine, trying for another child. I can't imagine, I just can't imagine this. And so I walk them through in the book. And if people do want the free book, when we talk about that at the end, they can get a hold of me and they can get my guided meditation, just a free link to that. But I walk through a guided imagery meditation of going on a canoe on the water and just getting into a relaxed state to think about what are some of those things that I do want to see in my life, and envisioning yourself smiling again. That's big. That's huge. It's scary, but it's something that we need to do is kind of see what's in the future.
Yeah, it is scary. I want to acknowledge that just trying to think about, gosh, am I going to be happy again? I want to be happy again, but that makes me feel guilty too at the same time.
Yeah.
So I did enjoy because the meditation is actually also written out in the book. And so you could do it easily on your own if you can. And I actually walk through it. One thing that you mention is about taking a few minutes after your meditation to think about where you would want to be in a certain amount of days, like 90 days out, I think, and 6 months out or something. And I was actually wondering, what are some of the things that people want to see? I mean, what have you seen people make goals for where they want to be? Because like I said, when you're in the throes of grief, you're just like, I can't see myself happy. I cannot. Like, I don't know what to do. I can see myself just in bed crying every day. What are some things that you have seen people do that has helped them when they've created these quote unquote goals, or where kind of a vision of where they want to be?
So I've had people that it's as simple as I just want to feel a little peace. And part of the steps down the road that we'll be talking about actually helps to achieve some of that, just that the emotions of bringing in some tender emotions. I've had one gal out in California, she didn't sleep. Every time she laid in bed, she would just it was all consuming. And so we started working on the program. She was able to start finding a restful night's sleep. So those are some of the little things, and there's a reason why I don't have people go out much further than that. Definitely not beyond a year, but just kind of let's take it in small little chunks. It's because it's really hard to envision what life's going to be like a year from now, 2 years from now, 10 years from now.
Yeah.
It's about doing where would you like to be even 3 months? Do you want to get back to work?
Yeah.
Is that something that's important to you? That might be one of the goals. Or do you want to, have a memorial for your child? That might just be one of the goals. It could be that, one thing that can bring some peace or some contentment or something back into your life. And so that's why we just want to really what it is envisioning that there is a future. I mean, that's probably the honest answer. It's envisioning that there really is a future and you can move forward. You really can with the support.
Yeah. I think that's good. I like the fact that you said that it's not too far out, because like you said, I don't know what I remember being just so like, I don't know what I'm doing at the end of the week. I have no idea what I'm doing at the end of the day. And so having kind of a little bit of a milestone that's just a little out, just a tiny little bit distant out, then you can work towards that. That helps considerably. I know, because I was just thinking about it. I was like, what if somebody just says, I don't want to be sad anymore? I'm like, oh, that's kind of ambiguous. But the ones that kind of the goals that you mentioned were a little bit more concrete, I would say.
Yes.
Okay.
We try to go a little more concrete just because you can see it.
Yes.
You can envision it.
Yeah. So then you move on. So obviously people can kind of, I feel like that could be a really helpful chapter to kind of spend some time in, and you can revisit it quite often actually, as you try and make these mini milestone goals as the time goes on. The next letter is engaging, E for engaging your tribe. And I'm actually interested to hear your take on engaging your tribe, because my independent nature is like, I don't need to, like, I'm fine. I don't need help. Let's talk about that. Why is it so important to have people surrounded by you be surrounded by people that are looking out for you?
Well, this is one of my favorite parts of helping people, is because independence is something that we all strive for.
Yeah.
As to be independent, and we're strong, and especially for the women, that we don't want people to see us as weak.
Yeah.
And not capable of taking care of ourselves. And the other, so that's part of the tribe, is we are not here to do life alone. Bottom line, we are social beings, and we're here on this earth to be social beings and to support one another and be in relationship with one another. One of the things with engaging your tribe that I really encourage people is don't choose people out of your own family.
Oh.
And there's a reason for that. When you're grieving and with the loss of a child, whether the child came to term, stillbirth, or an older child, your family is grieving with you. And so it's really, really difficult to lean into them, or you may feel like you need to be the strong one all the time because, like you were taught, when you were talking about that husband that was unable to go back to work and the woman was able to start part time. But it's so crushing. And so she may feel like she needs to be there for him and be the strong one
Yeah.
and not be able to kind of go deep in her own grief. Grief is so important. And that's what I really want people to understand is grief is part of the healing process. We need to go there and we grieve because we love so deeply. So finding people who are, I just say 2 to 3 people that are willing to be there for you in any capacity. And you kind of figure that out with the people that you choose. And it's been amazing because every time that I have that be an assignment with one of my clients, they're like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. No, I'm used to giving to everybody else. I really don't want to ask. And every time they come back, and I know exactly what they're going to say, is their friends or the people that they choose say, this is such an honor for me. I've been wanting to help you and I didn't know how to. And I feel honored that you feel like I could be part of your tribe. And absolutely, I'm there for you. And
Yeah.
it's just beautiful.
It is. I have found that people are just itching to help. They just don't quite know. And I really appreciated your guidance of like, okay, think of those people, think of how they can actually help you, like a very concrete way, which I've never thought of before because it's kind of like, hey, will you just blah? I mean, it was kind of like, will you make sure I get up on time so I can go to work? Like I was
Mhm.
surprised. And I know there are people that would be willing to do that. And
Yep.
and they would feel honored. They would feel, yeah, like you said, excited to participate to help you through this because it's just one thing they could do in a situation they might not know how to help. So yeah, I really liked that concreteness of like, now you got to figure out what you want those people to do and be concrete about it. And how do you envision them being a part of your life to help you through this? So
Yep. And it's such a valuable insight into ourselves because we do find that we're strong, but to be able to, you're giving a gift to other people by allowing them in.
yeah. So family members or friends that are trying to support a lost parent, would you ever recommend that those people try and offer themselves up as a like a tribe member, like you said? Would you say, hey, I can come by and I can call you every morning to make sure that you're up so that you can go to work? Or I can help you. Let's go sit down together and do laundry together, whatever it happens to be. Would you ever recommend that? Because we do have a lot of listeners that are people trying to support lost moms and dads too.
Absolutely. I think absolutely reach out. Reach out. Don't let fear stop you from reaching out. And yes, take a look at it and say, let's go do laundry. Yeah, let's go do laundry together. Or maybe can we have a cup of coffee together? Or just be there. Maybe the person who's grieving just is so sad and sobbing. Always meet them where they're at.
Mm,
And if it's just sitting with them. But yes, absolutely. For friends and family members who want to be able to help and don't know how, ask.
okay.
It's as simple as asking. And I know some people just have an innate way of doing that and bringing things. Sometimes people bring the covered dishes and the food and that type of thing. But if you know your friend well enough, just think about what might your friend really make a difference for them.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference when people just show up and they're ready.
Yeah.
They're ready to help. So, the A in breathe is accessing your own inner healer. And this was actually a little hard for me because I thought, gosh, there are days when I just don't feel like I can even keep myself going, or I don't think I can access that kind of power or whatever it is. It just doesn't feel like I have it in me. What would you say to people that are in that case who are still that are grieving and they're like, why do you want me to do this? I don't think I can do this.
Well, as you read in the book, there's lots of different ways to access your own inner healer. I give a lot of different options for that. when we are grieving and going through deep emotional things, what happens is the energy inside of our body gets stuck. It gets stagnant and we can actually get sick. So if you've been living in grief, I would say, how many times have you gotten a cold or maybe a flu bug, sinus issues? Because it comes to us. Our lungs are part of our breathing system, and the energy of grief, the emotion of grief, blocks our breathing system. So that's thus the name Breathe for the program. But it can erupt in so many different ways and make us physically ill. So I talk about just learning how to breathe. And I have people walk through breathing in through your nose and exhaling out of your mouth and doing that just 3 to 5 times. That's as simple as accessing your own inner healer, is allowing that breath to come in and allowing the anxiety, the fear, the depression, all of that, and letting it breathe out into the ends of the universe. That's a healing modality right there. I am a Qigong teacher, which is ancient Chinese medicine. And this has been the kind of medicine that's been around for 7,000 years.
Yes. Centuries. And yeah.
Yes. And so that's one of the things, is just learning how to breathe. I do go through what are a couple of Qigong movements and encourage people that they can reach out and find, I can give them videos of how to do Qigong. But the other thing is my faith toolbox. And this is something that, oh gosh, several years ago, I coined the phrase for the acronym FAITH is finding awesome inspiration to heal. And what I did at the time, because I would encourage my coaching clients, just let's find some little things. Well, I just did a brain dump and I made a list of 40 things. I think I started out with 25 and now it's at 40 things. And it was just simple things like taking a tub bath with Epsom salts and a little bit of lavender. Or one thing that I encourage people to do is if you're feeling in the depths of grief and you just feel like you can't breathe, open a window and just do those 3 to 5 soft, deep, gentle breaths. And then just see if you can settle down enough to listen for the birds outside. Just as simple as that. Or the squirrels rustling in the trees if you have that close by. Maybe going for a walk. Maybe putting on a comedy show. Sometimes those are the things that we need to do, is something that's lighthearted. But whatever those things are, and then I encourage every one of you who are listening, just write down this list, because you want to have it to be a go-to for you so that you don't have to think about it.
Yeah, when I read that, I was just like, oh my goodness, I have totally done this before when I think it was after a breakup or something, or it was like, I had to write down stuff that I like to do. So I'd remember that that's what I enjoyed doing. And I could easily access that list. And I thought that was really good because, once again, it feels kind of overwhelming to say, oh, access your inner healer. And it does feel like, oh, I don't think I have it in me. But then all the suggestions you made were such small little things that would bring a little bit of, like, almost a glimmer of joy or a little bit of peace in just even that moment. And that would help. And I really like that. So, and I was going to say, Pat also has, you can access her, you can email her, and I'll put a link to her email in the show notes, but you can, she will send you the list, right, that you created,
Yep.
Which I think is great because it's a jumping off point, because there's going to be, people will have different things that they like to do. And so, but I thought that was excellent. Just, she even talks about like having a gratitude journal or doing some meditation and meditating. It doesn't have to be sitting down and meditating for an hour. It can be a meditation of some breaths or going on a walking meditation. There's a lot of different things that can be done to help you kind of, like you said, access that inner healer. It feels daunting, but it's not that daunting, I think.
Well, and I think the gratitude journal, if you don't mind, I'll just speak to that, because that one is a very key one. There's actual scientific studies out there in the research of positive psychology. And so when you go to bed at night, if you can just have a little slip of paper, a little journal next to your bed, and just write down 3 to 5 things that you're grateful for out of your day. And it may be as simple as that orange tasted pretty good this morning, or that cup of coffee, was nice and warm. It warmed me up. It doesn't have to be big things, but when we put the 3 to 5 things and we write them down, right before we go to sleep, they kind of, I think of it as a coffee pot. It's percolating inside of our subconscious
Yeah.
all night long, and it's steeping us with things that are going to actually, gratitude will get us happier.
Yeah.
And the science has shown that people who do this for 30 days, 30 nights, I should say, actually the research has shown that they get happier between, the time that they start within 30 days, within a month period of time. And it is that simple of just writing it down right before you go to sleep and allowing it to simmer, percolate inside your subconscious all night.
I did not realize that there was a little bit of science to the doing it at night versus in the morning, but that totally makes sense because your brain is still kind of on when you're sleeping,
Hmm.
but it has things to think about. That's cool. I like that. Okay, well,
Yeah.
good. So, yeah, okay. I once again, accessing the inner healer is not as scary as you may think it to be. When I first saw that, I was like, I don't know if I
Right.
could do that. Yes, you can. Okay, so moving on, the T in breathe is transforming your view. And you open with this beautiful a prayer almost. And I want to read it because I just thought this was interesting because you actually use this as a tool for your mom even. It says, "I am sorry, please forgive me, I love you, thank you." And all of those phrases are such important phrases. We try and use it on a day-to-day basis, right? We're trying to teach our 5-year-old daughter to say these good phrases and to have this as a prayer, as you say, a Hawaiian prayer of reconciliation and forgiveness. And why do we need to have such like a prayer, this kind of prayer in the grief process?
Well, the big part of this is sometimes we may have perceptions, and I'm going to use my mom for an example. So, all those years, she held the perception that everybody kind of abandoned her in her grief. They couldn't talk about it. My brother, I just recently realized this, I didn't realize it until about 3 weeks ago, is he died on one day, and they actually did the wake and buried him the next day. So she had no time to be able to process through this at all. And then it was never spoken about. So she felt totally abandoned. And so we needed to unwrap that a little bit and figure out what really was happening. Cause I just couldn't imagine my family, my father and my grandparents and all these people just like being that way.
Yeah, ignoring it or yeah.
Right. So I asked her, kind of tell me what was going on during that time. And what happened is, in the weeks preceding my brother's death, three other people in the immediate family died. My cousin died unexpectedly. He was not quite 12 years old from a ruptured appendix. And that was on a Saturday. A few weeks after that, his mother, my dad's sister, had a brain aneurysm.
Mm.
Totally unexpected. She dies also on a Saturday. A few weeks after that, my great grandmother, who was the grandmother to this child and, to
Mm-hmm.
Eleanor,
Yeah.
my dad's sister, and she lived with Bobby and Eleanor and her family, she dies. So then a few weeks after that, my brother goes in, he sees the doctor, he comes home, he gets ill, and he dies in the middle of the night, also on a Saturday. So my dad lost a nephew, his sister, his grandmother, and then his child, all within a matter of, let's say, 6 to 8 weeks period of time.
Yeah.
My grandmother, she lost a grandchild, her daughter, her mother, and another grandson. She didn't have the capacity to be there for my mom. She was so deep in her own grief that I'm sure she could not think at all, because that wasn't my grandmother to ignore my mom. And once I was able to lay that out for my mom in a different way, it was like, wow, she understood. And it almost was like you could just see it lifting up, that it wasn't that they were trying to diminish her and ignore her feelings. They were just so deep in their own grief that's why I say have that tribe, because you do need to have someone else available for you too, because your family may be so deep in the grief that they don't have the capacity to be there for you.
Yeah. That unpacking of what actually happened was really important to your mom to see that. And did she express her feeling lighter about the entire situation? Or I guess it was a long time ago, so maybe it still stings.
Well, no, she wasn't as angry because when we first started talking about it, there was bitterness, there was anger there, and so that was really important. And then this prayer, this Ho'oponopono, these 4 statements that you read, it's a Hawaiian prayer of reconciliation and forgiveness, and there's so much more into that. That's a whole science and a whole way of working with families and healing grief and lots of different things. But I took her to the cemetery. It was my brother's birthday, and it also happened to be Father's Day. And I thought it would just be very helpful to take her to the cemetery where we were laying flowers because it happened to be Father's Day. And I did the Ho'oponopono prayer, standing over my grandmother's and my grandfather's gravesite. And I just said, I'm doing this on behalf of all the people that you felt weren't there for you because that wasn't their intention. And she kept saying, well, why are you saying you're sorry? And when I said, please forgive me, she looked me in the eyes and she said, I do. And she got it. And that just helped to release some of that. So everybody has maybe their own stories. Maybe you felt abandoned, or maybe people have ignored your deep feelings of loss, or said something that just, unfortunately, sometimes people say things that are well-meaning, but you just like, what? I can't believe that came out of your mouth.
Yeah.
And those things all can sit within us. And so that's why I just encourage you to take a look at what are some of maybe is there anger sitting out there? Is there feelings of guilt?
Yeah.
With the loss of a child, guilt is a big one. And seeing if you can step back from that and reframe what really happened. My mom thought that she did something. She didn't. She was just this terrified mother trying to console her child. And she felt so bad that she wasn't there when he died.
Yeah.
But she had been told to go home.
Yeah.
And so your listeners may have some of that. And so it's just like getting in there and re-looking at that, telling yourself a different story that in a way that it makes it more acceptable. I have some clients that their son died by suicide early last year. And that's the big thing is they don't have an explanation.
Yeah. Did
And
I miss the signs, or how could I have helped him? Or
right. What could I have done? And so that's been the thing that just weighs on them. So what we really worked through is let's think about what might be. Why might that have happened? And then they came up with what their belief is, what happened in that moment of despair for him. And it helped them to have a greater understanding and a little more peace in their heart.
If someone is unable to kind of unpack those kind of layers, as you kind of talk about in the book, do you have any other thoughts? Is it best to try and go to a therapist, to go see a life coach? Is it because there are some days that like you just are not thinking straight, and you can't unpack those beliefs that you have of the anger, the guilt, all these things. So any recommendations beyond?
Yes, I encourage that if that stuff is feeling like it's sitting there and it's holding, and usually you're going to know, like, I have such great anger, or the guilt is just eating me up. Get some help, have someone come. And so there are therapists out there that specialize in grief. There's people like me that are grief coaches. This is all we do, is just to help unwrap that so that you can come up with the vision and the story that's going to help you to be able to live with whatever went on, and kind of reframe that so it's something that can rest easier on your heart.
Yeah. Yes, I highly recommend going and finding more help if you need somebody to just walk you through that, because that can be overwhelming sometimes to try and figure out what happened or what your beliefs are right now. Moving on, and because I heard something recently that they talk about the different stages of grief, and this is a fairly new stage of grief, is what I've heard, is the H in yours, which is honoring your child, finding purpose, finding a way to remember your child. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like it's a very kind of a new idea of this is part of the process. This is part of the process.
Absolutely. So I'm going to use my mom as an example.
Mm-hmm.
We never talked about my brother. He was like, he wasn't, I don't know, like he had never lived. And I never could understand that. And so we never did anything to really honor him until now in later years, I've actually taken that on. But it's so important. I work at a children's grief camp. I volunteer and been doing that for many, many years. And that is one of the things that's really super important. We have the children and then their parents, their family members do candle lighting ceremonies because sometimes you might not have been able to say goodbye. And just being able to say goodbye or that I love you. And yes, it can be extremely emotional, but it's honoring this spirit, the soul, keeping their spirit alive for the rest of your time because that brings hope for you. It brings a connection with your child. And so it could be some people will do celebrate the birthdays.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And maybe have a little cupcake or something.
Mm-hmm.
Or some people, they used to do balloons. We're not doing that so much because
Yeah.
of the environment. But, or some people may have a memorial garden. Or I know a grieving dad who his son died about a year ago. What they did is they took a lot of the monies that people gave to them
Mm-hmm.
and they built a bench at the baseball field where their son would play
Oh,
baseball
that's great.
and in memory. So then he can go and they sit on the bench and just find that quiet time to connect with their son. So there's so many different things that to keep their spirit alive.
Yeah.
Always, because that is part of the healing process. It is. And yeah, I think it is probably fairly new. In my mom's day, you didn't do that.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable.
It was uncomfortable. People weren't ready to talk about it or acknowledge that it happened. I like where you talk about how words have energy and even speaking your child's name is huge. And that is one of one of the reasons why we started this podcast is so that parents could say their child's name. And so because we believe that same thing is just like honor your child, say his or her name, because that makes a huge difference to you, your heart, and it creates a connection to your child. So I really like that. So that was really good. I feel like there's a lot of great stuff being done in honor of children that have gone too early. And so I think what a great way to point that out and encourage others to do the same thing too is to somehow remember them on a daily basis or however often they need to.
Yep. I was recently a speaker for a breakout session. It's the Bereaved Parents USA. They have a national organization, and a lot of states have local ones. And so we did it via Zoom because of the COVID thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they had wonderful presentations. But at the end, they did such a beautiful job in the fact that even though this was all over the internet, they had each child's name, and where they had a picture, they put up the picture of the child. And we each were sitting in our homes, had a candle. And when my brother Greg's name came up, I was able to light that candle. And you could just feel this beautiful energy because they had probably 175 names read of these children. And it was just the most beautiful ceremony. So if you could do that at home, just to say your child's name and light a candle in memory of your child, absolutely will bring you some peace. I know it. It's that connection.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I think October 15th is where you can light the wave of light. They do the same thing. They light a candle on that day. And there's a certain time in your time zone that you light it in honor of your child. And I think that's so beautiful just because you get to acknowledge, and you can post on social media, and it just brings awareness, and you get to talk about your kid. It's great.
Yes, I love that.
It's beautiful. So I really enjoyed that chapter. It feels like when we've done stuff for our son Brandon, it feels like I'm doing something. Like this is my way of nurturing him. Like I'm not able to take him on trips or make his bed or whatever, but I can do these other things in honor of him. So I think really super important chapter there. The last the E is embracing change through hope. And I want you to kind of take that apart if you can, because hope also has an acronym to it too. And this is kind of, I feel like, the one where it's just like, you know what? Every day now, it's just going to be this constant thing. So can you talk a little bit about that? This last
Absolutely.
this last step.
Yeah. We know that once we find our purpose, our life purpose, our soul's purpose, whatever you want to call it, and we can step into that, that is where true healing begins and moves forward, and it's deeper and creates such a difference in the lives of everybody you touch. So hope, yeah, I'm the acronym queen. But hope for me is honoring our purpose every day. That breeds hope, that when we honor our purpose. So you do this podcast, you're sharing with so many other grieving parents this beautiful podcast with information. That's being of service to others. That's your hope. It's honoring your purpose of being there for others because of what you went through. Some people may get up on stages and talk about organ donation, or I know some parents, where their children have died by drug overdose, and so they'll get up and speak about that. Or there are so many with stillbirths and where communities will come together and some parents will just do some really special things. And that's about honoring our purpose every day. Or the purpose may be, I'm just really going to do a great job raising the children I have.
Yeah.
If I don't have children, that I'm going to be kind and maybe help my neighbors out, whatever it may be. There's a story, and it's about a Chinese woman that her husband had died, and then her only child, her son, had died. And she kept going around the village and she wouldn't let them bury her son. And she kept saying, please make him alive, please make him alive. And she was so distraught and absolutely could hardly breathe and move. And someone finally said, well, go up on this hill and there's going to be a man sitting underneath a tree. I think maybe he can help you. So she went up the hill of their village, and there was a man sitting underneath this tree. And he said, I can help you. I want you to go down to the village, and I want you to go to every village door and every family and ask them if they have experienced the death of a loved one. And if they have not, have them give you a mustard seed. Now go collect all these mustard seeds and then bring them back to me, and I can help you. So she goes into the village, and one of the renditions of the story is she goes and no one can give her a mustard seed because everybody had experienced that tragic loss of the death of a loved one. And she gets to a palace, and it was like the last place that she went. She knocks on the palace thinking, okay, I'm going to get some mustard seeds here because I'm sure nothing terrible has happened within the palace walls. And they said, I'm sorry, we can't give you a mustard seed because we have experienced death here. And her awareness just opened up, and she's like, oh my gosh, everybody has experienced what I've experienced. And so one of the renditions of the story is that she went to go work for the palace and help them. But she went back to the man sitting under the tree up on the hill, and his name was Buddha, which most people probably recognize, sitting underneath the Bodhi tree. And because of what she did, that was her healing, and that was how he was able to help her. And she finally allowed them to bury her child, and so that she could move forward in her life, even within this deep grief. So that's what hope is honoring your purpose every day, whether it is something very simple. It might be just, maybe your purpose is just to smile at anyone that kind of you come across. Or if you're working at a store and that's your job, to greet your customers with attention and a smile. It might be as simple as that. Or it may be getting up on stages or starting a podcast or all of these things to raise awareness, finding what works for you.
Yeah. I love that story. When I read that story, I was like, oh, this is such a good story, because it just you realize that you're not alone in this, like, your loss. And even as small, the stillbirth community or the infant loss community, you're not alone in those kind of losses, and everybody has experienced that. And I love that finding a little bit of service to do, finding that purpose every day really can help you not feel so alone. You're part of this. We're all together. We're all together in this, right?
Right. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. Pat, I have really enjoyed going through this with you because I did have a lot of questions and you answered them and they were wonderful. Tell us where we can find you. And you mentioned your book, and I will, like I said, I'll put a link in the show notes to access the book if you want to purchase it on Amazon because it's available soft cover, but then also I think you can get it on Audible. Is that correct? Or
Well, here, the first thing is anybody who wants the book, I can send you an ebook for free.
wonderful. Okay. So I will put a link to your website then.
Yes.
Okay.
And you can just order the free ebook, and it's www.healingfamilygrief.com. But I will send you the ebook version of it. Now, if you want it on Audible, you'd like to listen to it, that is through Audible. There is an audio book, and if you would want to have the paperback version, you can go on Amazon, but actually, I'll tell you a secret. I ordered a whole bunch of those. And so if anybody really wants to have the paperback, all they have to do is just reach out on my website on the contact page and said, Pat, I'd really love to have a paperback copy, and I'll send one. No charge.
Wonderful. Thank you. That is extremely generous because like I said, it's not just a book that you want to just peruse. This is a book that it requires some action and some work, some soul work to, if you are in the place where you are ready to go with it. Like I like the options where you're like, you might have read this book and thought, okay, I'm ready to go. And then others are like, nah, I'm not quite ready yet. Or if you need a little bit more help, there's a little bit more help that can be had. So yeah, Pat, thank you very much. This was great. And I'm actually going to reach out to my friends that are struggling still and seeing if this might be something that they are ready to embark on. So
yep, I'll be more than happy to get a book off to them. So just let me know.
Awesome. Once again, Pat, can you say your website one more time, and I'll make sure we get those in the show notes.
Okay, it's www.healingfamilygrief.com.
Wonderful. And thank you, Pat, again for your insight, for your wonderful energy, and the hope that you're bringing to a lot of families that are struggling. So thank you again.
It's been my pleasure, and it's just been wonderful sitting here with you.
I know it has been wonderful. It's been a great way to spend an afternoon.
Absolutely.
Lee, I know that you were not in on that interview with Pat, but wasn't it so good? You edited the episode.
I did, and I quite enjoyed that. What is it, an acronym? Breathe?
Yes, and I just thought it was so good. She does a really good job of being concise and then having some really actionable steps for any lost mom or lost dad can do to try and help them as they process this grief and as they mourn the loss of their child.
And so, Pat, thank you again for coming on the podcast. That was just wonderful for me and wonderful for Winter.
Yes, for sure. Thank you again, Pat.
Head over to our website, stillapartofus.com, and there you could find the show notes, including a full transcript of this episode and any resources that were mentioned. And there you could sign up for a short and helpful email newsletter. There you can learn how to become a patron and support the work it takes to produce this show for just a few dollars a month. And lastly, there you could find out how to get in touch with us if you would like to share your child's story on the show. The show was produced and edited by Winter and Lee Red. Thanks to Josh Woodward for letting us use his song Vanishing Note. You could find him at joshwoodward.com.
Lastly, subscribe to the podcast and share it with others that might need this. Why? Because people need to know that even though our babies and our children are not with us, they are still a part of us.
A great pleasure in life is doing what people say you cannot do. Walter Bagehot.